Let's get rolling here, guys. Once again, thanks for being here this morning. This is a good presentation. I've seen it before. So with that, I'm going to bring up Jamie Bradley with Emma. He's talking about the sixth sense of marketing and basically what makes us click. So I'll bring up Jamie.
Oh, God. Careful there. Hey, guys. Got my Britney Spears mic on. I'm ready to conquer this thing. As Scott said, I'm Jamie. I am a content marketing strategist at Emma, and we're an email marketing company, so we're going to talk about email today. That'll be pretty exciting. I have been with the company for about 7 years, and in that time, I have seen email move the needle for, our 50,000 customers, and I've also seen it move the needle for us. So I work in marketing for a marketing company, and we use Emma at Emma, which is exciting. But it's not just anecdotal. It's not just because I say you should do email marketing and it should be the center of your efforts. The Direct Marketing Association actually says $44 for every dollar spent is the average ROI on email. So, hey, that's pretty cool. If you're spending your money, where should I spend it? Email sounds pretty good. That is more than double that of every other channel. Digitally. So that's more than search, display, SEO, all that jazz. So that's pretty compelling. What's also compelling, here we go. Email is actually the #1 activity on the internet. When polled, people say, I check my email. What's the second most popular thing? Can you guess? Using a search engine. So I know, the internet is not Google, though they own Gmail, so they're winning all over the place. But people actually get online to check their email before they Google stuff, which is crazy. What's even crazier is that email is actually the #1 activity on mobile devices, which doesn't seem correct, but it's true. So that's kind of good. Adobe said it. I trust them. But, I've been working in this space for a while. People were like, mobile's going to kill email. We're going to get on Facebook, and we're going to talk to each other. There's going to be some crazy new app. And really what happened with the advent of mobile getting really popular is that we are now psychotically just walking around like, I can check my email everywhere. I can check it at the stoplight. I can check it in the car. So we're just walking around with a mobile inbox with a phone app, basically, which is what we say. So, pretty cool. This slide's a bit of a jump, so stick with me here. I have a point. There's something really interesting going on in this slide, and it's going to help us get to the point of today's presentation, which is why we do the things we do with email. Can anyone see the weird thing happening in this KFC snacker slide? There's an arrow pointing to it. There's a dollar bill hanging out in that lettuce. That's so sneaky. This is here because... Does this work? Did this sell more snackers? I have no idea. The 99-cent price tag and that hot steam probably helped. But the dollar bill in that lettuce signifies that we as marketers are really curious, and we all have a goal. From the dawn of advertising and marketing, we have one goal, which is to find our target market and then sell them things or get them to do something. And that has taken so many forms. We try everything. We pull out all the stops, all these tactics. Somebody sitting there was like, put a dollar bill in it. That'll get them to buy the snacker. Who knows if this worked, but if it did work, it worked on a completely subconscious level. The 99 cents is in your face. That dollar bill maybe got to you. So the big commonality in all of our audiences, hopefully, as marketers, no matter what we're doing, is that the people that you're marketing to, the human beings on the other end of those email addresses and those interactions, should have one of these, hopefully. If not, you have a huge challenge and should probably go elsewhere. But everyone has a brain, and we all fundamentally sort of have some similar behaviors no matter what we do. Brains aren't B2B, they're not B2C. Your brain and the way that it operates doesn't fundamentally change if you get a new job or do a new thing. Same as for your consumers. As human beings, we have gut reactions fundamentally in about 3 seconds. That hasn't changed over time. What has changed is our attention span. So in the year 2000, our attention span was around 12 seconds. In the year around, I think it was 2010, it was 8 seconds. So our brains are changing, they are shifting, but this gut reaction, this is actually a stable thing. And this is baked into us. Eons of evolution have baked this in, and there's actually a part of your brain called the amygdala, which is also kind of known as the primitive brain, and that is the part of your brain that formed first in utero. It's also the part of your brain that, controls that fight or flight mechanism. So that thing that tells you to stop or go forward or have an immediate reaction, it's all happening in this really primitive part of the brain, and that's, again, the part that doesn't really change. Your amygdala is processing things 1/5 of the time that your conscious brain takes to process information. So there's an area called the hippocampus. That's where your memory is stored. That's where you're really processing things at a higher level. The amygdala is just like, there's danger. There's a cave bear, whatever it is. And so it's like, what does that have to do with marketing? Well, inboxes are really crowded places. Those gut reactions start to become super important in this space. And this space specifically is my inbox. I have 8,000 unread emails. And the one that's highlighted is from my boss. And the subject line says the words urgent and request. So that's what you're competing with. You're competing with Cynthia asking me to do something urgently and trying to get my attention. And so my gut reaction to that is, I don't care about West Elm right now. I care about Cynthia. And that's a challenge for all of us. You can't control how many emails that she sends me and how many requests she makes, but you can control some really fundamental things about what you test out in this space to try and get my attention. For instance, obviously we got to talk about subject lines. They're not sexy, but it's the first thing that happens when I encounter you in my inbox. And actually people, we talk about subject lines all the time. The from name is actually the first thing that people react to in the subject line. Some of us, I know we don't always have room to test that, but when people ask tips about testing subject lines and their effectiveness, I always say, what's your from name? Is it, could you put your name at Emma? Can I say Jamie at Emma is inviting you to something? Does that make sense? Try that out, test it out. But as far as your subject line goes, some really interesting things that you can do are about the length. So as I mentioned, email's the #1 activity on mobile devices. Litmus, our friends at Litmus say over 53% of your audience is now experiencing your email first on a mobile phone. So if you have a giant subject line that's super long, it's going to get cut off. I'm not going to read it. You have about 36 characters. This subject line is exactly 36 characters. They're pushing the envelope. So the overall length has something to do with it. I say the shorter the better. More importantly, though, this is not the place to test out your comedy routine or be super mysterious. Your email should have a focus and a goal, and the subject line should immediately tell me that there's going to be some inherent value there. This one's great. Just a few short hours, it's urgent, there's a number in it, my brain's like, oh, what's going on here? I'm gonna flag this after I get done putting out the fire that Cynthia's put on my plate and maybe go back to it. Also, the pre-header text now, which you actually can't see here, if your pre-header text, which is that text when I'm looking at your email on my phone, still says, having trouble viewing this email, click here to see it online, that can be one thing that you do today to take that back and change that, because that is wasted real estate. Again, you only have 3 seconds to get my attention, and you can alter that pre-header text to support what you want me to do and why you want me to open this email. And so that's a pretty cool thing. And you know, on the iPhone 6, which is like a cracker box, it's gigantic, you have about 3 lines of text now, which is crazy. So definitely think about that. So you've crafted this awesome subject line. I opened your email. Now what's going to happen? So the brain, we talk about the primitive brain. If you think about it, when we were cave people, to be PC, we were cave people back in the day, we couldn't speak to each other. We couldn't write things down. We could only go on what we saw happening. And our brains, as a result, through eons of evolution, process images 60,000 times faster than text. That sounds like I'm misspeaking. I'm not. It's crazy. The majority of your brain is dedicated to processing imagery before it processes other things. When we talk about those gut reactions, pictures are truly worth 1,000 words or 1,000 clicks. Specifically, to start here, your brain loves 3 things, and this couldn't be more primitive. It is food, sex, and danger. And if you think about it, unless you're selling dangerously sexy food, that's a bit of a challenge, but we'll talk about, how to kind of use this in a less literal way. But if you think about it, of course that's what your brain reacts to. People that could figure that out became our ancestors, basically. Those are the basic things that we need to survive. And obviously, this company sells food. This company's just selling a mobile app. They made the choice, hey, let's put a delicious smoothie, and then let's put a beautiful picture of a girl that probably doesn't work here in the email. So, there are things that you can do to tap into this sort of primitive place in the brain. But the other thing that your brain loves, and this is in a really literal interpretation of it, but your brain loves wide open spaces. Your brain loves pastoral imagery. It produces an immediate sense of calm. And if you think about it again, I'm a caveman, I'm walking out. If I can see all around me and I can tell there isn't a dude with a club ready to punch me in the head and steal something from me, I feel pretty good about that. So that is hardwired into us. If we see space, wide open space, we can quickly assess what's going on. We feel good about that. Obviously, if you're Patagonia, easy as a marketer. If you're Nature Conservancy, super easy. And we'll talk a little bit later on about how you can tap into this in a less literal way. But there's this one industry that nails this, and I always think it's so funny. The pharmaceutical industry figured this out a long time ago. They figured out wide open space and people throwing their hands in the air just makes you feel so good. This feels so much better than renal failure, right? Like this feels pretty good. Here's another one. Cattle thrombin, Google it later. These people need to feel good. They need to feel safe and secure. And this just feels a lot better. So, and you think about like Cialis ads, there's two people in a bathtub, two different bathtubs, it doesn't even make sense, but there's wide open space everywhere. So think about ways that you could incorporate that. Obviously, it's not gonna translate literally for everyone, but it's interesting to note. But more than both of the last two things we talked about, your brain loves faces. Our brains are hardwired from birth. It's one of the first things that we're able to actually recognize as human beings. Your brain loves faces. Again, if you think about it, you need to be able to see if, hey, that dude, I see his face, is he mad at me or is he happy? Or are we cool? Are we about to get in a fight? I'm a caveman, we can't talk. So human faces are make or break for us. We need to be able to interpret expression and things of that nature. Specifically, we also need to be able to see the expressions in people's eyes. So actual studies have shown that if you and I are looking at each other and I look away really fast, you're gonna turn and look. I mean, it's just an instinct that you have because you think, hey, there might be something happening over here. Marketers have tapped into this and learned, oh, hey, this little boy, he's looking at a free shipping offer. He's looking at a call to action. He's looking over to this part of the mailing that actually gets me some clicks and gets me to do things. So when you use close-up face, images of human faces in that top piece of real estate, that top sort of above the fold area, to use a newspaper term, you can do some powerful things with it. You at least stand a better chance of getting my attention. We love faces so much that we actually see them everywhere, even when there aren't really human faces attached to it. To me, it's called pareidolia. It's a cognitive phenomenon. And my favorite's the little puking dryer guy. He's my fave. But we point this out because if you think about it, a really classic motif is the smiley face. It's just two dots and a line curved up or down. But our brains are so wired to see that as a face that we actually interpret that as like happy and sad. One of the best emails I ever received was after a trip like this, and I got back and Expedia sent me an email and it just said, "How was your trip? Smiley face, frowny face." And I was like, ooh, smiley face, it was good. So really interesting and something that you can tap into as well. Make it easy for me, give me something that I understand cognitively to latch onto when you first have my attention. So you get my attention, I'm interested, I wanna see what's happening. You're not sending these emails for your health. If someone told you that, you should go back to your doctor, get a second opinion. You're doing this as a marketer because you need me to do something. You want me to click and take an action. That's what this is all about. And so with the advent of mobile being such a force in email, we start to see buttons everywhere. Every call to action is a button. And that's not random. Buttons are a lot easier to tap on a mobile device than a tiny text link, and it just makes sense. Apple actually figured out that the surface area of the human fingertip is 44 pixels by 44 pixels squared-ish, and UX designers, people that are designing things actually shape their buttons in that way because I can tap that easily. There's also something in the brain, a cognitive bias called the von Restorff effect, and that essentially is that innate thing wired into us where we notice things that are out of place. That is, again, another thing. It's a survival instinct. You have to be able to notice that something's not right. Oh, okay. It translates to the email space where you think of paragraph of text, button, paragraph of text, button. Also, on mobile phones, we're scrolling. Our friends at Litmus say, embrace the scroll. Gone are the days of, like, you have to make a tiny email because people actually they want to do this. They want to tap stuff. But if you put your button up in the middle, once I get all the way down to your email, I'm actually going to be more likely to remember that it was up there because it sticks out in my brain. Some other tactics you can use, this is an email we sent. If you look at this button, it is centered. It is a contrasting color. Interestingly enough as well, though not all of your buttons can be yellow, this one just happens to make sense. Yellow as a color actually produces a slight level of anxiety in the brain. So if you got something that's really itchy and you really want somebody to click on it really fast, test a yellow button. See if it makes a difference. Blue makes people feel secure. It makes people feel calm and secure and serene, which is why a lot of financial institutions and Facebook and things that need a little bit more of a commitment use blue. So if you're asking somebody to, say, give you their money immediately or do something that's a little less secure, maybe test a blue button. But most importantly, make sure that I can see it. Make sure it doesn't blend in with the background. The other thing, if your buttons say click here, stop that. We're not clicking anymore. Again, we're tapping, we're doing things. Once you have my attention, once I see the button, make sure that the language in that button actually reflects what you want me to do. If you want me to register for something, use active verbs, use first person, speak to me directly, because once you have my attention, then the rest of my brain kicks in and is actually going to process what you want me to do. So we go to one of my favorite examples. When I first put this presentation together, I didn't have this email in it, and then I received this email, and I was like, this is everything I've been talking about. I got so excited. So this is an email from J. Crew. They're not an Emma customer. They just do email really well. And one of the first things that you notice in this email is this sexy, somewhat dangerous woman, and she's just standing there in her leather pants. She's looking at something. I'm like, what is she looking at? And she's looking at this call to action that's telling me to go look at her cool outfit. The other thing is that there's this copy that's really easy to see. It's sized really largely. So if I'm looking at this on my phone, it stands out. It's also surrounded by space. It's surrounded by enough white space. She's surrounded by space. The text is surrounded by space. It's very sparse. And that's where that pastoral sort of sense of calm and feeling, I can focus on what they want me to do here because they've used these tactics. This email is also not short. Again, we like to scroll. So here are the next two sort of panels. This would be one long email. And what they're incorporating here is something that we've all seen a lot. BuzzFeed exists because of a list of listicles, and we all think, oh God, it's so trendy. If you hate them, they're not going anywhere, because it turns out these are getting results because our brains know how to process lists better than they know how to process big paragraphs of text. We need images, and we need things to be spatially laid out for us so that we can focus on them. And if you think about it, you make a grocery list, the simple act of making that list, even if you leave it in your car like I always do, or leave your phone in your car where the list is, just the act of making it helps you remember it. I made a list of every slide in this presentation this morning so I could remember it. So I think that's really interesting. It's just the way that we like to process things. Design-wise in this email, a thing that I absolutely love that has really, kind of taps into that curiosity is, as I'm scrolling, if I'm looking at the shirt, I can see the top part of the scarf. If I'm looking at the scarf, I can see the top part of the pants. So it's actually drawing me down. So when we talk about calls to action, it's not just the button. Think about, it's not just the images at the top either. Think about what you can do with images to keep me interested and keep me scrolling. And again, put space around things. Don't make it hard for me. And if you make it a numbered list, if you have a lot of items, this is a good way to go with that. Because people are scanning. People are not reading your emails. If you are a writer, I write a lot of copy, and it pains me sometimes. I have to think nobody cares. Nobody is reading word for word your email at all. We are scanning our inboxes. We are scanning the email. So the easier that we make it so that people can actually absorb the information that we want them to hear, the better. And so in this last kind of bit, we're going to move into a customer story of ours that sort of actually defies a lot of I'm basically telling you what to do, and then I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't do it. So we have a client. They are based in Charleston. They're called Garden and Gun Magazine, which we're based in Nashville in the South. When I'm down there and I say it, they're like, oh, I know that refined publication. And up here, you're like, guns, what? But trust me, it's actually a upscale sort of literary magazine. The same people that like the Derby and Faulkner, they love this, and there are a lot of them in the South. And so when they first came to Emma and they started using us, we sort of audited their email program, which is a thing that we do with people if they need it. And we looked at emails like this, which is what they were sending. They just wanted to move it over to us, and we were like, that's a lot of words. That's a lot of text. And Kim Alexander, who is their director of marketing, was like, our audience actually reads stuff. Like, they actually like to read. And we were like, touche, try something else. And she was like, this is working. People are clicking stuff. And we're like, all right, okay. The thing that I think is most interesting about this, though, so she stuck to her guns. She wanted to do it. But we were able to dig into her data and see that, so you see the well of images there at the bottom. Well, people were clicking those with a lot of frequency, and she was like, I want to start selling ad space on the side of my emails, and I can guarantee the impression because I'm seeing activity down here at the bottom of the mailing after the big paragraph of text. And we were like, that's awesome. We were like, okay, take that a step further. What are they actually clicking? And so we dug back in our data. People were only clicking on food and booze. Like, that was it. Like, we were like, every time you send something about like baseball, they don't click it, but if it's a cocktail, they're clicking it. Which is, again, primal brain at work, right? So they have basically switched to this format where that well of cocktails and food are what they put down there. And again, they're selling ads now because they're able to guarantee that people are gonna go nuts for that delicious, what is that, barbecue. They're gonna go nuts for that. But as with any good email marketing program, and this is kind of where I get on my soapbox a little bit, as with any good email marketing program, if you're not testing and looking at the data, I can stand here all day and tell you what somebody else did or what you should do, that you should put a pie in your emails. If that doesn't work for you, then it's not working for you. So you've got to actually be able to get into your response analytics and look at how your emails are performing. And so Garden and Gun did just that. And they were like, okay, this has been working, but as with anything over time, I have to switch shampoo every 6 months. Things just stop working sometimes. So they actually switched to, or tried this out. This is kind of what their new emails look like, or what a new version of their email looks like. This is really bold for them. Remember, these are the people that said people read our emails. And so they switched to this format, and we were like, okay, well, don't abandon the first one. Start doing this one too. And so what this allowed them to do, this became super popular with a certain segment of their audience, for sure. So what they were able to do is they were able to then segment their audience and say, these people love this format, and I bet I would be willing to make some assumptions about the demographics that respond to either one, which I won't voice here, I'll let you guess. But there are people that love this first sort of mailing, and there are tons of other people that are loving this more image-based, tiled list style format. As you noticed as well, they're leading with food and booze because they realize that works for them. And that's great. So here is an example of a closer view of one of these new mailings. And if you look at it, what's the first thing that you notice? That's like, what's the first what's the thing that pops out? Exactly. And I want to eat a hamburger now. Every time I see this, I'm just like, oh, I want a hamburger. That hamburger stands out. And you're again like, I'm a lawyer or I'm a law firm. I can't put hamburger in my email. Maybe not. But there's some other things going on with this hamburger. So this hamburger obviously is tapping into my primal brain and my need to eat meat and cheese. But there's delicious Korean food above that. I actually probably want that to eat that more than I want the hamburger. But the hamburger in this mailing is also tapping into some other things in our brain. The hamburger is a different color scheme than everything else in the mailing. It's almost like this monochromatic, sort of yellow-looking mass. Also, it's surrounded by space, surrounded by white space. My brain's honing in on the hamburger. And then also, it kind of looks like a button. I want to click on the hamburger and see like what's actually going to happen here. And so, yeah, that's kind of what happened. I mean, and we see this and we want to eat the hamburger for sure. And sure enough, this is from their response data. More people clicked the hamburger than they clicked anything else in the mailing. And not only that, I mean, and obviously, you know, the wedding in Charleston got some good stuff. I think the most interesting thing about the wedding in Charleston, I don't know if you can see that, is that the thing that they clicked is see the photos. People are like, I want to see photos. I don't want to read about it. The hamburger, though, the way that this is in their Emma account, the way that we do it, is that they have one circle, and then people loved it so much, they clicked so much on it that it actually has like 2 circles, and then more people clicked the list, and it got about like 6,000 clicks in this mailing. And I think it's really fascinating because everything else is tiled, but this hamburger really stood out. And I think that what makes me happiest about, you know, their program, again, is that they were willing to test. They were willing to see who wants to do what, who wants to do this, who wants to do that. And again, that's the only thing that we can kind of like drive home to you guys is, you know, you can try every tactic, you can try, you know, adding faces and whatnot, but at the end of the day, you know your audience, or you should know your audience. And that should be your first goal as an email marketer. If you just have a list of email addresses, I was talking to someone yesterday, they were like, I just have email addresses, I have 6,000. I'm like, you have a goal now. Your goal is to find out what they want. Your goal is to find out what they want to click. And you can use some of these tactics that are kind of baked in innately into the things that we're talking about to get to that point. But, you know, if you don't know anything about your audience, that's your first goal. And then from there, you can tap into my brain. You can think about what are the things innately, you know, we have 3 seconds to kind of get their attention. What can we do there? So, you know, I want to leave you with that. And then also, I think I've got like 3 minutes left, so I was going to take some questions if you guys have any. Typically, there are, I almost want to say there's usually like a standard lot of them that are like, I don't want to use a hamburger. But yeah, yeah, 256. Anybody got anything? Yeah. 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 Her question was, how long of an email is too long? Question is, I know this sounds like such a cop-out, you just have to test that out. So again, I think the interesting thing is that we can scroll now, basically. Before, you know, we've seen the evolution of email where it was like the newsletter, where people were just taking their paper newsletter and it was 3 columns and it had 50,000 calls to action. It was this long. And you started hearing everyone stop doing that. Like no one is reading these things, no one's interacting with them. So then the shift focused to, okay, everybody do a really short mailing because of that above the fold kind of area, and then preview panes and like MacMail and Outlook, that was all you had to play with. And that piece is still important because people are, especially in B2B, people are still viewing their emails primarily in that preview pane. I mean, I obviously check email all day on my phone, but the majority of my emails that I'm interacting with that you guys will send me after this thing and that we'll send you, I'm looking at them at my desk, at my job. I would say to that question too, what do you do? Oh, perfect. So yeah, if you work for, let's say, more of an entertaining kind of industry where it's not a B2B thing, where you're not trying to sell me or get me to download a white paper, well, that's fine. They're like, get out of here. Nah, I'm back. If you're doing that, especially if you're in the leisure industry, I would say that email needs to be as long as what you have to say to them. If it's a focused goal where I want you to buy this one thing that's on special right now, you don't need to do a long email just to do it. But if it's like Garden and Gun where you've got 20 different articles, I have no idea how they landed on, you know, the number of articles, but I'm sure they have a running list of, you know, 15 or 20 new pieces of information, and all they did was pick images for it. So it's not that it needs to be 20 miles long or that there's a specific point where people lose interest. I think it's most importantly, obviously don't make it super long if you don't have enough stuff to fill the email. Don't just start putting stuff in there so that they will scroll. It's more, don't be afraid of that scroll. But to that point too, when we talk about using buttons and things, the placement of your button, I would say if you're not using buttons as your calls to action, start doing it. But you have the levers of testing where you put it. So if there's like one big call to action, test where that falls in that long email, or maybe repeat it if it is a really long email, and kind of see how those results start to shake out for you. So it's kind of a long, convoluted answer to that, but you know what I mean. There's no magic formula, but there are things that you can test, because maybe you'll send one that's this long, and you find out that was way too long. Nobody made it to the bottom. So that was actually the only question I had. So I'm actually out here at the booth. If you do have more questions, we would love to chat, and we only get smarter together. So I'd love to learn more about what you guys are doing. Thank you so much.